Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about something that almost nobody explains clearly. And because of that, a lot of good relationships are ending right at the moment they were finally starting to become real. The first time an avoidant doesn't just disappear, your whole system gets confused because you've been trained by their patterns to expect one thing. When emotions get big, they vanish. That's been the story. Things get close, you open up, you ask for clarity, you share that something hurt you. Then suddenly they go quiet. Days of silence. No explanation. And you're left alone, spiraling, wondering what you did wrong, replaying every word, begging your phone to light up. So when, for the first time, instead of ghosting, they send a message that sounds like, "I'm overwhelmed, I need some time, but I'm not leaving," your brain doesn't trust it at first. It feels like another rejection, another, "You're too much," another coded way of saying, "I don't want you." But in reality, that clumsy little signal is the first real sign that they're trying to stay, even while their fear is screaming at them to run. You have to understand what it costs them to send that kind of message. For someone with avoidant tendencies, vulnerability is not just uncomfortable, it feels unsafe. Growing up, they may have learned that emotions lead to chaos, criticism, shame, or abandonment. So their nervous system built a strategy: when feelings rise, shut down, withdraw, go inward, disappear. It wasn't a choice, it was protection. So silence became their language. Distance became their coping. Vanishing was the only way they knew to get their nervous system back under control. When they start to move from vanishing into signaling, they are doing something they never saw modeled and never practiced. They are staying in connection enough to tell you what's happening instead of just leaving you in the dark. For you, that message, "I'm overwhelmed, I need time," lands on old wounds. You might hear, "You're too much, I can't handle you." Your feelings are a problem. That's because your own nervous system has learned a different story. When someone pulls away, it means you did something wrong. You are in danger of losing them. You must fix it immediately. That's your survival pattern. So your instinct is to chase, to explain, to convince, or to shut down yourself because you're tired of being too much. But what if, just for a moment, you could hear their words as data instead of verdict? "I'm overwhelmed" doesn't mean you are wrong. It means my capacity is small and I'm bumping into the edge of it. "I need time" doesn't mean I'm abandoning you. It means I'm trying not to drown. The shift from disappearing to signaling is subtle but huge. Before the cycle looked like this: you get close, a deep talk happens, their fear spikes, they vanish, you panic, you chase, they feel suffocated, they pull further. Nobody feels safe. When they start signaling instead, the cycle has the chance to change shape. You get close, a deep talk happens, their fear spikes, and instead of vanishing, they say, "I'm overwhelmed. Can we pause and come back to this later?" Now there's a bridge instead of a cliff. They're still afraid. They're still overwhelmed. But they're not cutting the cord. They're trying to stay tethered while giving themselves a moment to breathe. For them, that is enormous progress. This doesn't mean you tolerate endless stalling or accept "I'm overwhelmed" as a permanent excuse to never address anything. It means you recognize that early on, this is what growth looks like in their language. It's not poetry and long, vulnerable monologues. It's clunky honesty like, "I'm not good at this, but I'm trying." If you respond to that first shaky attempt with, "Oh, so here we go again," you're just running away. Their nervous system receives a confirmation of its worst fear. See, emotions equal attack. "I shouldn't have said anything." If instead you respond with, "Thank you for telling me where you're at. I still need us to come back to this, but I appreciate you not just disappearing." You're reinforcing a new pathway. Maybe I can tell the truth about my overwhelm and still stay connected. Or your job is not to baby them, rescue them, or excuse every shutdown. Your job is to notice the difference between old avoidance and new effort. Old avoidance is silence, stonewalling, ignoring your messages, pretending nothing happened. New effort is them reaching out, even briefly, to name what's going on inside. "I feel overloaded. I don't know what to say yet. I need a bit of time, but I care and I'll come back." Old avoidance leaves you guessing. New effort gives you something to hold on to, a thread of connection that wasn't there before. You still get to have boundaries. You still get to say, okay, take your time, but I do need us to actually talk about this tomorrow. Loving an avoidant doesn't mean abandoning your needs. It means learning to recognize when their weird little signals are actually them walking toward you, not away. That small text, that awkward sentence, is not the end of the work, it's the beginning. It doesn't magically make them secure. It doesn't erase the pain you've been through, but it does tell you one important thing, instead of defaulting to their safest pattern. Disappear and self-soothe alone. They are choosing a harder path. Stay in just enough connection to say, this is hard for me, but I'm not gone. That is love in their nervous system's native language. It is halting, imperfect, and often frustrating. And no, it is not your responsibility to wait forever while they figure it out. But if you've been begging for change, for honesty, for anything other than ghosting, don't miss it when the first fragile signs appear. Sometimes love doesn't show up as, I'm all in. Sometimes, especially with an avoidant heart, it shows up as, I'm scared out of my mind, and I'm still here. There is a quiet, almost invisible turning point in an avoidance journey where you hear a sentence you're not used to hearing from them. And if you're still flooded with your own pain, you might miss how huge it actually is. For so long, their default in conflict has been to turn the spotlight away from themselves and onto you. You say, I felt abandoned when you disappeared. And they say, you're too sensitive. You say, I need more consistency. And they say, you're asking for too much. You cry because you're overwhelmed, and they roll their eyes and label you dramatic, clingy, or emotional. Every time something hurt, it somehow became about how you were reacting, not about what they were doing. And after a while, you started to believe the story. You started to wonder if maybe you really are too much. Maybe your needs are unreasonable. Maybe love means shrinking yourself so they never feel uncomfortable. That's what constant blame does. It rewires your sense of reality. So when one day, in the middle of a tense moment, they quietly say, yeah, I know I shut down there. Your brain doesn't know what to do with it at first. It sounds small, almost like nothing. But it is not nothing. That tiny, awkward piece of responsibility is their nervous system doing something radical, choosing love over ego, connection over defense. You have to understand what it costs them to say, that was on me. An avoidant grew up in environments where admitting fault often meant being attacked, shamed, or made to feel defective. Their survival brain learned, if I'm wrong, I'm unsafe. So they built an identity around being self-contained, untouchable fine. In that identity, any suggestion that their behavior had an impact on someone else feels like a threat. When you say, it hurt when you pulled away, they don't just hear feedback, they hear danger. I'm failing, I'm being blamed, I'm losing control. Their first instinct is to push the discomfort back onto you. Blaming you, you're too emotional, isn't always conscious malice, it's a shield. It lets them avoid the scorching vulnerability of admitting, my choices affect the people who love me. So when they start to lower that shield, even slightly, and say, I see why you're upset, or I could have handled that better, that is their nervous system stepping into a place it has spent years avoiding. From your side, it can feel infuriatingly small because you're carrying so much more than one incident. You're holding an entire history of distance, broken promises, emotional absence. When you've cried yourself to sleep more nights than you can count, yeah, I shut down, can feel like a band-aid over a bullet wound. Your anger might flare. Now you see it. Now you say this after everything. And that anger is valid. You're not wrong for feeling it. But if you zoom out, you'll see that this moment isn't about erasing the past. It's about changing the pattern going forward. For someone who has made a lifelong habit of defending, deflecting, and disappearing, taking ownership of even a piece of the problem, is a crack in the armor that once kept you completely out. It means they are starting to tolerate the discomfort of seeing themselves through your eyes, not just their own. Responsibility, for them, is not just a sentence, it's a nervous system event. To say, I shut down, they have to feel the shame that comes with that awareness. They have to feel the guilt of recognizing your pain and connecting it to their action. In the past, that shame was so overwhelming they'd rather torch the whole conversation than sit with it. They'd raise their voice, shut down entirely, walk out, or stonewall for days. Anything was better than feeling, I hurt someone who loves me. When they start staying in the room long enough to say, I did that, they're learning to ride those internal waves instead of letting them drag them straight into avoidance. That is emotional weightlifting for them. It's not pretty, it's not smooth, but it's real. You'll notice the difference in the energy of the conversation. Old dynamic, you express hurt, they attack or withdraw, you end up apologizing for having feelings. New dynamic, you express hurt, they start to defend, catch themselves, sigh, and say something like, okay, I get it. I went cold. I do that. There might still be defensiveness wrapped around it, a justification here and there, but you also tacked on the end. Don't romanticize that, but also don't dismiss the part where they actually said, I do that. That sentence is a doorway. It's the beginning of a different kind of talk, one where you're not the only one on the examination table, one where their patterns are finally being named by them, not just by you. Your instinct might be to hammer the moment, to flood it with, exactly, you always do that, finally you see it. But sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply pause and let that responsibility land. You can say, thank you for acknowledging that. It means a lot to hear you say it. And then when emotions are calmer, follow up with, what do you think you need in those moments instead of shutting down? You're not rewarding crumbs, you're reinforcing growth. You're telling their nervous system, when you drop your armor and own your part, you don't get attacked, you get met. That doesn't mean you never express anger. It means you start distinguishing between unleashing on them and inviting them into deeper accountability. Taking responsibility is not the same as being ready for a healthy relationship, but it is a prerequisite. A partner who can never say, that was on me, will always make you the problem. A partner who starts saying it awkwardly, inconsistently, is shifting from survival mode into relational mode. They're beginning to understand that love isn't about staying spotless. It's about being honest and repairable. So when you hear an avoidant partner mutter, you're right, I shut down there, don't over-celebrate it, but don't overlook it either. That tiny, shaky admission is their heart whispering through a lifetime of defenses. I care enough about you and about who I am with you to tell the truth, even when it makes me feel small. That is ego cracking. That is love learning how to breathe. You will remember the first time it happens because for a second you'll go silent inside, not because you don't care, but because you're so used to a completely different script. The pattern with an avoidant partner in conflict usually goes like this. You share how you feel. You say, I was scared when you went quiet. I felt abandoned when you left in the middle of that fight. I felt small when you brushed off what I said. And instead of your feelings landing, they bounce off a wall of defensiveness. They start explaining, justifying, correcting, saying, that's not what happened. You're overreacting. You always do this? I just needed space. Why are you making it a big deal? Every time you bring your heart to the table, the conversation pivots back to their intent, their stress, their perspective. You end up arguing about whose reality is right, instead of them simply listening to the reality you're actually living in. And slowly, you learn to expect that. You expect to be measured. You expect to be made wrong. You expect that bringing up your feelings will cost you. So you start rehearsing your words, editing yourself, shrinking your truth to avoid setting off their alarm. That's why when one day they look at you and say something like, okay, but tell me what that felt like for you, your whole body doesn't quite know what to do. It's such a simple sentence, but it's a sentence they've never said before, and it marks a shift from self-protection to genuine connection that is much bigger than it looks on the surface. For an avoidant, conflict has never been about two people trying to understand each other. It has always been about survival. Their nervous system was trained early on that big emotions lead to danger. Maybe anger, maybe withdrawal, maybe shame. So when voices rise or tears appear, their brain flips into, how do I get safe? Not, how do we get closer? That's why you've watched them shut down, change the subject, intellectualize, or turn everything back on you. Their internal radar is only scanning one thing. Am I being blamed? Am I being trapped? Am I about to fail? When they begin to ask, what did that feel like for you? They are doing something radically different. They are turning their attention away from defending themselves and toward understanding you. That sounds normal in a secure dynamic, in an avoidant nervous system. It's a courageous act. In that moment, they are making several silent choices. First, they are choosing to tolerate the discomfort of not being the center of the story. When they ask how you feel, they're inviting your emotion into the space in a way that doesn't instantly threaten them. They're saying, I'm willing to hear your experience even if it makes me uncomfortable. Second, they are admitting, without using these words, that your feelings matter. That what happened isn't just about what they meant. It's also about how it landed for you. They are acknowledging there's more than one reality in the room. That takes humility for someone who has survived by clinging tightly to their own version of events. From your side, that question might bring up a wave of grief before relief, because you'll realize how long you've been longing to be asked it. You might suddenly feel all the times you cried alone after a fight and no one circled back to check how you were doing. You might feel all the swallowed words, the nights you lay next to them feeling emotionally miles apart, and not once did they reach over and say, hey, how are you really feeling about us? So when they finally look at you and say, okay, but what did that do to you? It can almost hurt to answer, because this is the curiosity you deserved a long time ago. It's okay if your first response is a little guarded, if you test it with something small, if part of you wonders, are they really ready to hear this, or is this a trap? That's your nervous system protecting you. But if you feel even a thin thread of safety, this is a moment to practice letting yourself be seen in the way you've been begging for all along. The important thing is not to romanticize one question as if it magically fixes everything, but also not to trample it under your hurt. You don't need to respond with, oh, so now you care? Even if that's what's screaming in your head, you can honor the shift without erasing the past by saying something like, I really appreciate you asking. It actually felt awful. I felt like I didn't matter. I felt like I was alone in this. You are giving them what they just asked for, the emotional truth, while also giving yourself the dignity of naming your pain. When they stay with that, when they don't bolt or snap back into defense, when they sit in the discomfort of hearing how their behavior impacted you, that's where real change can begin between you. Because when an avoidant starts asking how you feel, they are building a new template of love in their nervous system. They are learning that hearing your experience doesn't automatically mean they are bad, wrong, or unlovable. It just means they are in a relationship with a real human being who has an inner world too. They're learning that connection is not maintained by winning arguments. It's built by making space for both people's truths. They are moving from, how do I get out of this conversation with my identity intact? To, how do we get through this conversation with our bond intact? That shift is the difference between self-protection and genuine partnership. None of this means you tolerate chaos or endless cycles just because they occasionally ask how you feel. You're allowed to expect that this curiosity becomes consistent, that it shows up in more than one conversation, that it leads to different choices over time. But when you start to hear that question from someone who once only defended and deflected, recognize what you're witnessing, a frightened heart starting to turn outward, a mind that used to only explain itself beginning to genuinely want to know you. And in the language of an avoidant, that is one of the clearest signs that, however imperfectly, they really do love you. One of the clearest signs that something real is shifting inside an avoidant partner is not some big romantic speech. It's the moment they quietly start letting your words, your needs, and your presence actually influence what they do. At the beginning, it never feels like that. You suggest something simple. Can you please tell me when you need space instead of just disappearing? And they look uncomfortable, maybe defensive. Your request feels to them like control, like you're trying to manage them, like you're taking away the only coping tool they trust, shutting down and going silent. So they resist. They say things like, "That's just how I am. I don't like being told what to do," or "You're trying to change me." And for a while, their behavior matches those statements. They still disappear. They still go offline emotionally. They still leave you guessing what's going on inside them. But then, one day, you notice a small difference. They send a text that says, "I'm not ignoring you. I'm just overwhelmed. I need some time to myself, but I'll talk to you later." It isn't poetic. It isn't perfect, yet it's not what they used to do. That's not you controlling them. That's you mattering enough that they are willing to adjust their reflexes, even when every fiber in their body is screaming to do what's familiar. For someone who has lived their whole life protecting their autonomy, allowing another person to influence their behavior is a huge risk. Avoidants often equate closeness with losing themselves. Maybe they grew up with a parent who was intrusive, critical, or suffocating. Maybe they only got love when they performed a certain way. So, changing for someone feels like going back into that cage. Their freedom, their independence, their right to do things their way has been their armor. So when you say, "It would help me feel safer if you let me know when you're shutting down," their nervous system doesn't hear, "I want to feel secure with you." It hears, "I'm going to own you. You're not going to be allowed to be yourself." That's why you'll often see an initial pushback. But as they start to actually care about how you feel, as they see the impact of their behavior on your nervous system, something begins to shift. They stop hearing your requests as an attack and start hearing them as a map. If I want this person in my life, these are the things that help them feel loved. Changing behavior in real time is not easy for them. It's one thing for them to understand your needs intellectually. It's another to override their own autopilot. So the changes come in small, almost clumsy ways. Instead of vanishing after a disagreement, they take a breather and then circle back to say, "Can we talk now?" Instead of rolling their eyes and walking out of the room when things get emotional, they pause, stay seated, and say, "Okay, I'm listening even though this is hard." Instead of dismissing your request for reassurance, they force themselves to say, "I care about you, I'm not leaving." Each of these moments costs them something internally. They are going against their training. They are choosing to stay in discomfort because you matter more to them than staying perfectly comfortable. That is love in motion, not in theory. From your perspective, it can be tempting to dismiss these changes as bare minimum or too little too late, especially if you're exhausted from years of feeling unseen. Your anger has a point. You shouldn't have had to beg for basic consideration. You're allowed to want more than crumbs, but it's also true that in the world of an avoidant, these small behaviors carry the weight of big breakthroughs. A person who was once allergic to compromise is now bending. A person who swore, "I won't be told what to do," is now factoring in your emotional reality before they act. They are not surrendering their identity. They are learning that letting love influence you is not the same thing as losing yourself. That lesson is foundational for any long-term relationship. Letting you influence them isn't about you running the show or them becoming submissive. It's about mutual impact. It's about them accepting that their choices don't live in a vacuum, that their silence, their last-minute cancellations, their emotional disappearances leave marks on your body and mind. When they start texting before they pull away, showing up to hard conversations they would have avoided before, and changing small daily habits because they know it makes you feel safe, they are acknowledging a profound truth. You exist in my world. Your experience matters. I am willing to move because you're here. That is not control. That's partnership. And if you've ever cried into a pillow wondering, "Do I even matter enough to affect them?" then these small shifts are your answer. They might not say the sentence directly, but their behavior is whispering it every time They override their instinct to run. You matter enough to make me move. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they're with an avoidant partner is expecting love to arrive looking polished, poetic, and confident. And when it doesn't, they assume it isn't love at all, when in reality, for an avoidant, love almost always shows up clumsy, scared, and shaky at first. You have been trained by movies, social media, and even securely attached people around you to think love announces itself with certainty. I know you're my person. I'm ready. I want this. But a nervous system that has spent a lifetime equating closeness with danger cannot say those words without feeling like it's standing on the edge of a cliff. So instead, their version of "I love you and I want to build something real" often comes out as "I don't know how to do this, but I want to try with you." To you, especially if you're anxious or exhausted, that can sound weak, non-committal, even insulting, like they're telling you they're not sure about you. But listen carefully. The most important part of that sentence is not, "I don't know how." It's, "I want to try with you." For someone whose entire survival strategy has been, never need anyone, never depend too much, never let anyone too close, the decision to try, to practice, to risk getting it wrong in front of you is wild bravery. Think about what they're admitting in that moment. They're saying, "I don't have a template for this. I didn't grow up seeing two adults talk through conflict without destroying each other. I didn't grow up believing that if I shared my needs, somebody would respond with care instead of criticism or control. I've spent years protecting by staying distant, staying busy, staying in my head. So no, I don't know how to do this, but something about you makes me want to learn." That is not a small thing. That is an entire nervous system turning around on a road it's been running down for decades. Of course, it's going to look messy. Of course, they will say the wrong thing, pull back when they should lean in, give half answers when your heart is craving full reassurance. Love, for them, doesn't begin as fluent language, it begins as stuttering. The danger here is that your own pain, your own fatigue, can make you dismiss that stuttering as nothing. You might tell yourself, if they really loved me, they'd know. They'd be sure. They'd say the right words. But often, the people who are the most polished with their words are the least willing to actually do the uncomfortable work. They can promise you the world and disappear the moment it's time to sit in the fire of repair. With an avoidant, you'll often see the opposite first. Fewer dramatic declarations, more quiet, trembling effort. Things like, "I'm really uncomfortable having this conversation, but I don't want to run." Things like, "I need a break, but I'm not leaving, I'll come back." Things like, "I don't know what to say, but I hear that you're hurt." Are these lines perfect? No. Do they erase the past? No. But they are evidence that love is starting to win small battles against fear. When they say, "I don't know how to do this," you might feel a rush of disappointment because you wanted a partner who came fully trained in intimacy. You didn't sign up to be a teacher. That longing is valid. You are allowed to want someone who meets you where you are. But understand what's also true. Almost no one grows up fully trained. We all bring our patterns, our defenses, our unhealed parts into relationship. The difference with an avoidant who is genuinely trying is that they're now willing to put their go on the line and admit they don't know, instead of pretending they're fine and making you feel crazy for wanting more. "I want to try with you" is them saying, "I'm willing to practice in front of you, even if I fall on my face a few times." That vulnerability might sound small, but from their perspective, it's like walking out on stage without armor for the first time. Your power in that moment is not to rescue them, fix them, or lower your standards. Your power is to stay anchored in what you need while making room for imperfection. You can respond with something like, "I appreciate you being honest. I don't need you to be perfect, but I do need consistency and effort. I can walk with you while you learn, but I can't do the emotional work for both of us." That way, you honor their courage without abandoning yourself. You acknowledge their shaky, "I want to try," as real, while also making it clear that love must grow into actions, not just sit in intention. Over time, if their "I want to try" is genuine, you'll see it in the pattern: fewer disappearances, more signal, fewer blame shifts, more ownership, fewer walls, more questions about how you feel. That's what love looks like learning to walk. So when you hear an avoidant partner say something vulnerable, halting, and imperfect like, "I don't know how to do this, but I want to try with you," don't confuse that with, "I don't care." It is, in their language, one of the clearest confessions of care you'll ever get. You still have choices. You're still allowed to leave if the trying doesn't turn into growth. But don't make the mistake of walking away purely because their love doesn't look like a movie script. Sometimes the truest love doesn't strut in with confidence. It trembles at your door, shaking, breathless, and still says, "I'm terrified, and I'm here." There comes a point in this journey where you have to become a pattern reader, not a moment collector. For so long, you've lived off little moments with this person. The rare, "I miss you." The one weekend they were fully present. That one night they opened up and cried in your arms. You held onto those flashes of closeness like proof that everything would eventually change. Then the cycle reset. They shut down, disappeared, blamed you, and you were left asking yourself, was any of it even real? That's what trauma does to you in a relationship like this. It trains you to cling to isolated highs while ignoring the overall pattern that's wrecking your nervous system. The sixth keynote is about the exact opposite: stepping back, breathing, and asking, is there a pattern of change emerging? Or am I just getting hit with the same cycle in a different outfit? When an avoidant actually loves you and starts to do the work, it will never be about one grand gesture. It will be about consistency. You'll start to see thread lines running through their behavior. Less vanishing, more signaling. Less, "You're the problem." More, "I see what I did there." Less knee-jerk defensiveness, more effort to stay in the conversation even when they're uncomfortable. These shifts are rarely dramatic. They don't show up with a neon sign. They show up in the way arguments that used to explode now de-escalate faster, in the way they come back to repair sooner instead of letting days or weeks go by, in the way they might still say, "I need space," but now add, "and I'll check in with you tomorrow." Real change doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like less chaos. Your job is to watch the trend, not worship the one moment. Anyone can send flowers after a brutal fight. Anyone can say, "I'll do better," when they feel you slipping away. Anyone can cry once or twice and say, "I'm scared of losing you." Manipulation lives in the moment. Growth lives in repetition. So you start to ask different questions. Are they doing this only when they're afraid I'm leaving? Or even when things are calm? Are they signaling and taking ownership only when cornered? Or is it becoming their automatic way of relating? Are they making changes only with words or with actions you can actually feel in your body as calmer, safer, more predictable energy? When the answer starts to lean toward, "Yes, I actually see a different pattern over time," that's the shift you don't ignore. That's when you're not watching another game. You're watching a scared heart slowly learn how to stay. The reason I say, don't walk away blindly, is because some of you are so hurt that the first slant of them struggling again makes you want to slam the door on the whole thing, even when the overall direction is forward. You've had to be strong for so long that you confuse heard with wrong. You tell yourself, if they slip, it means nothing has changed. But healing doesn't move in straight lines. They will have days where they get it right and days where their old wiring hijacks them. The difference now is whether they come back to repair without you dragging them, whether they notice their own behavior, whether they care enough to say, "I'm sorry, I went into my old pattern there." If you see that happening more and more, that's not you being love blind. That's you recognizing that they're actively rewiring. None of this means you silence your boundaries just because you see effort. You still get to say, "This specific behavior is not okay. I need more consistency. I won't stay if this keeps repeating." But instead of seeing every misstep as proof that they never loved you, you start to measure their love by their willingness to keep showing up differently again and again, especially after they mess up. A scared heart learning to stay will sometimes shake, Sometimes flinch, sometimes say the wrong thing, then come back and try again. A scared heart that's still just playing games will blame, deflect, and play victim every time you hold up a mirror. So you watch. You watch not just what they do when they're losing you, but who they are when they have you. You watch what happens not just in the apology, but in the weeks that follow. You watch whether your nervous system, over time, feels slightly safer with them than it used to, whether your body relaxes more often in their presence than it tenses. And if you can honestly say, the pattern is changing, it's still imperfect, but it's undeniably different, then you are not foolish for staying. You are not weak for seeing their effort. You are a conscious partner walking beside a wounded, but willing heart that is finally, slowly learning how to stay.